At the dawn of the 14th century, Anatolia stood at a historic crossroads. Once a thriving frontier of empires and civilizations, the region had become fragmented, unstable, and vulnerable. Two dominant powers that had shaped the political order for centuries, the Byzantine Empire and the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum, were both in decline. Their weakening grip did more than create chaos. It opened a rare window of opportunity. From this political vacuum, a new and ambitious power began to take shape, one that would transform regional struggles into the foundations of a global empire. By around 1300, the Byzantine Empire was no longer the formidable force it had once been. Internal divisions, economic decline, and repeated civil wars had drained its strength. Constantinople remained symbolically powerful, but its authority barely extended beyond the city walls and a few surrounding territories. In Anatolia, Byzantine control had shrunk to scattered fortresses and thinly held borderlands. Imperial armies were underfunded, local governors acted independently, and rural populations often felt abandoned by the central state. This steady erosion of power left vast frontier zones exposed to new actors. At the same time, the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum, which had dominated Anatolia after defeating Byzantium at Manzikert in 1071, had effectively collapsed. Mongol invasions in the 13th century shattered Seljuk authority, reducing the sultans to figureheads under foreign influence. As central control disappeared, Anatolia fragmented into dozens of small Turkish principalities known as beyliks. These beyliks were ruled by warrior leaders who competed fiercely for land, resources, and followers. While politically divided, they shared a common culture shaped by Islam, Turkic traditions, and a frontier warrior ethos. This fragmentation created intense competition, but also constant movement. Warriors, tribes, scholars, and merchants traveled freely across Anatolia, shifting loyalties in search of opportunity. Borders were fluid, and power was not fixed by ancient titles, but earned through military success and leadership. In such an environment, ambition mattered more than pedigree, and flexibility often proved more valuable than tradition. It was precisely these conditions that allowed a small frontier principality to punch far above its weight. The western edge of Anatolia was especially significant. This frontier lay directly against Byzantine territories, making it a zone of almost continuous conflict. Raids, counter-raids, alliances, and betrayals were part of daily life. For Muslim warriors, these borderlands were seen as a land of Gaza, holy struggle against non-Muslim powers. This ideology attracted fighters eager for both spiritual reward and material gain. Leaders who could channel this energy gained loyal followers and military strength far beyond their modest beginnings. One such leader emerged in the region of Bithynia near the Byzantine frontier. He ruled a small territory, modest compared to neighboring beyliks, but strategically positioned. Unlike rivals focused on fighting each other, this frontier leader directed most of his energy westward against weakened Byzantine towns and forts. This choice proved decisive. Victories against Byzantium brought land, loot, and prestige, while avoiding prolonged conflicts with fellow Turkish rulers. Equally important was the leader's ability to unite diverse groups under his banner. His followers were not only Turks but also local converts, displaced farmers, and even former Byzantine subjects seeking stability and protection. Rather than ruling through rigid tribal structures, he built a flexible system based on loyalty, shared purpose, and reward. This inclusiveness allowed rapid expansion without provoking internal collapse. The social and economic conditions of the time further supported this rise. Rural populations across Anatolia had suffered from decades of war, taxation, and insecurity. Many villages were willing to accept new rulers if it meant peace, fair taxation, and protection from bandits. The emerging power presented itself not merely as a conquering force, but as a provider of order. Land grants to warriors ensured defense, while local customs were often respected to maintain stability. Religion also played a central role, but not in a narrow or dogmatic sense. Sufi orders, dervishes, and religious scholars moved freely through frontier regions, spreading ideas that blended spirituality with warrior values. These figures often supported rising leaders they believed destined for greatness, reinforcing legitimacy among followers. Their lodges served as centers of learning, recruitment, and social support, helping bind communities to the new authority. Meanwhile, the Byzantine response remained weak and inconsistent. Lacking manpower and resources, imperial officials often relied on diplomacy, bribes, or temporary alliances to delay losses. Some Byzantine towns negotiated surrender terms that allowed residents to keep property and religious freedom. While intended as damage control, these arrangements often accelerated the transfer of power by making conquest less destructive and resistance less appealing. Geography also favored expansion. The region included fertile lands, trade routes, and access to key cities. Control over these areas generated revenue, which could be reinvested into military campaigns. Each victory strengthened the cycle. More land led to more resources, which supported larger armies, enabling further conquests. What began as a small frontier state quickly gained momentum. Crucially, leadership style distinguished this rising power from others. Instead of focusing solely on short-term plunder, its rulers pursued long-term control. Fortresses were repaired, towns repopulated, and administrative practices slowly developed. Authority was personal but increasingly institutional, laying the groundwork for a durable state rather than a temporary war band. By the early years of the 14th century, observers might still have underestimated this frontier principality. Larger beyliks existed, and Byzantium still claimed imperial legacy. Yet beneath the surface, the balance was shifting. The combination of a political vacuum, military opportunity, social flexibility, and strategic leadership was producing something new. This was not merely another small state struggling for survival. It was a growing power with vision, adaptability, and momentum. The conditions around 1300 were not unique in history, but rarely were they exploited so effectively. The collapse of old authorities created space, but space alone does not guarantee success. It was the ability to organize, to attract loyalty across cultural lines, and to turn frontier chaos into structured expansion that set this new power apart. From the ruins of Byzantine decline and Seljuk fragmentation, a foundation was laid, one that would soon support an empire stretching across continents. What began as a response to instability would become a defining force of regional and global history. The rise was not sudden, nor inevitable, but rooted firmly in the conditions of its time. In the shadows of collapsing empires, a new order quietly took shape, ready to step onto the world stage.